Let me tell you about the last vampire in America. She wasn't a count. She didn't live in a castle. She was 19 years old and her name was Mercy. You've been told the vampire came from Transylvania, from an old book, from a man in a black cape. That's the story we made comfortable. That's the one that can't hurt you. The truth is worse, because the real American vampire wasn't a monster at all. It was a sickness, a slow, patient sickness that walked through a family and took them one at a time. And the people watching it happen, good people, church people, farmers, they got so frightened, so desperate, that they did something we can barely say out loud today. They dug up their own dead. They cut the girl open, and they burned her heart on a rock. This really happened in Rhode Island in 1892. It was in the newspapers. And what they were really fighting, the thing they mistook for a vampire, is still one of the deadliest killers in human history. I'm going to show you where the vampire actually came from, not the fiction, the grave. Welcome to Exhumed Legends. Rhode Island, a hard little farming town in the 1880s. Stone walls, thin soil, long winters. The kind of place people left when they could. George Brown was a farmer here. He had a wife, Mary Eliza. He had children. He had a life that looked, from the outside, like every other life in that valley. And then it started to disappear. In December of 1883, his wife died. She'd been wasting away for months, coughing, pale, losing weight no matter what she ate. At the end, she was coughing blood. The following year, in 1884, his oldest daughter, Mary Olive, just 20 years old, died the very same way. The same cough, the same slow fade, the same blood. The family had a name for what was killing them. Everybody did back then. They called it consumption, because that's what it looked like. Something was consuming them, eating them from the inside, quietly, over months and years. We have a different name for it now, tuberculosis. To understand why an entire region started believing in vampires, you have to understand what this disease actually did to a person. Because if you didn't know what a germ was, and in 1883 almost no one in rural New England did, consumption didn't look like an illness. It looked like something was feeding on you. The victim grows pale, bloodless. The skin goes thin and white, almost translucent. They lose weight, week after week, no matter how much they eat, as if the life is being drawn out of them. They're exhausted all the time. They sleep. They wake more tired than before. At night the fever rises, so they sweat through the sheets. And in the dark, lying in bed, many of them felt a terrible weight settle onto their chests. A pressure, like something sitting on them, pressing the air out. Then comes the cough, and finally, the blood, bright red on a white handkerchief. Now picture a family sharing one small farmhouse, one cold room, one bed. Sometimes, when tuberculosis moves in, it doesn't take one person. It takes the mother, then the daughter, then it reaches for the next. To us, that's obvious. It's an airborne infection passing between people living in close quarters. To them, it was something else entirely. The dead were not staying dead. The dead were coming back for the living. This idea didn't start with the Browns. It was already old. All across rural New England, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, there was a folk belief passed quietly from town to town. When consumption swept through a family, killing them one after the other, people came to a chilling conclusion. The first one to die was to blame. They believed that the dead relative was not resting in the grave, that they were somehow still alive down there, feeding on the family they'd left behind, draining the survivors, pulling them one by one into the ground. Nobody used the word vampire much. That word came later, from the newspapers. The villagers just knew there was a cure, a terrible cure. You had to open the grave. You dug up the suspected dead, you looked at the body, and if it seemed too fresh, if there was still blood, still color, if it didn't look dead enough, then you had your proof. You had found the thing that was killing your family. And you had to destroy it. You burned the heart, sometimes the liver too, and in the worst cases, the ashes of that burnt heart was mixed into water or medicine and fed to the sick relative to break the curse, to save the one still living. This wasn't a rare one-off horror. Historians have found dozens of these cases across New England, stretching over more than a century. Graves opened, hearts burned, bodies rearranged in the dark. It was, in the most literal sense, a panic. A community so afraid of a disease that it couldn't see that it turned on its own dead. Which brings us back to George Brown, standing over two graves, watching his family vanish, because it wasn't finished with him. His only son, Edwin, a strong young man, well-liked, recently married, began to show the signs: the cough, the weight loss, the pallor. Edwin fought it. He did what people with money and hope did in those days. He traveled west to Colorado Springs, chasing the dry mountain air that was supposed to heal the lungs. For a while, it seemed a little better, but the disease was patient. Edwin came home to Rhode Island, and coming home, he got worse. And then, in the winter of 1892, consumption took the next one. Mercy Lena Brown, George's daughter, 19 years old, she died on January 17, 1892. Because she died in the dead of winter, the ground was frozen solid. You couldn't dig a grave in January in Rhode Island. So Mercy's body was placed in a small above-ground crypt, a stone-receiving vault at Chestnut Hill Cemetery, to wait for the spring thaw, when she could be properly buried. She lay in that cold stone room, in the freezing New England winter, for almost 2 months. Remember that, it matters. Edwin was dying now. Everyone could see it, and the people of Exeter believed they knew why. The neighbors came to George Brown, friends, townsfolk. They had watched his family be erased, and they were terrified it would spread to their own homes next. They believed one of the dead Brown women was a vampire, still down there, still feeding, and now feeding on Edwin. There was only one way to know for certain, and only one way to save the boy. Open the graves, all of them, and check. Here is the detail that makes the story so human, and so sad. George Brown didn't believe it. By most accounts, he thought the whole idea was superstition. He was a grieving father who had already buried a wife and 2 daughters. And now his neighbors wanted to dig them all up? But his son was dying, and when your last child is dying, and everyone around you swears there's a cure, even a monstrous one, how strong do you have to be to say no? George gave permission. He did not attend. On the morning of March 17, 1892, a group of men walked out to Chestnut Hill Cemetery with shovels. A doctor came too, the local medical examiner, Dr. Harold Metcalf, and a reporter because word had spread. They opened the graves of the Brown women. Mary Eliza, the mother, dead 9 years, she was bones. Mary Olive, the older daughter, dead 8 years, bones and dust and decay. Exactly what the doctor expected, exactly what nature does. Then they opened the crypt where Mercy had been lying since January, and Mercy Brown had not decayed. She had been resting in a stone vault through 2 of the coldest months of a New England winter, essentially in a freezer. Her body was remarkably preserved. There was still color in her. When they moved her, the men said she seemed to have shifted position in the coffin. The doctor understood what he was looking at. Cold slows decay. 2 months in near-freezing stone will preserve a body. There was nothing supernatural here at all. But the doctor cut into her anyway, because the crowd demanded it. He opened her chest. He examined her heart and her liver. And in her heart there was blood, liquid blood. To the doctor, this was ordinary. To the frightened people standing in that graveyard, it was the proof they had been dreading. A body that hadn't rotted. Fresh blood in the heart of a girl 2 months dead. They believed they had found the vampire. What happened next is the part that will stay with you. They took Mercy Brown's heart and her liver out of her body. They carried them a short distance, and they burned them on a nearby rock, there in the cemetery. Then they took the ashes. Edwin, the dying brother, was given those ashes, mixed with water into a kind of tonic, and he drank them. His sister's burned heart dissolved into medicine, swallowed in a last desperate attempt to stop the thing everyone believed was killing him. It didn't work. Of course it didn't work. Edwin Brown died about 2 months later in May of 1892. Because there never was a vampire, there was only tuberculosis, the same infection that had been in that family for a decade, already deep in Edwin's lungs long before anyone opened a grave. They cut out a girl's heart to cure a disease that was never in her body at all. The story didn't stay in Exeter. Newspapers picked it up, including the Providence Journal, and they were horrified. To the educated city readers of the 1890s, this was proof of dark, backward superstition still alive in the New England countryside, in a modern age of science. They wrote about it with disgust. That reporting is a big part of why we know the details today. And that's when the word started to attach itself to Mercy, vampire. She became known as the last of the New England vampires. Some call her America's last vampire. There's a thread that runs from here into the horror we all know. A newspaper clipping about American vampire cases was reportedly found among Bram Stoker's papers. Stoker, who published Dracula just 5 years later in 1897. We can't prove he read about Mercy Brown specifically, and honest historians are careful here, but the New England panic was in the air, in the papers, in the years he was writing the most famous vampire story ever told. The horror writer H.P. Lovecraft, who spent his life in Providence, barely an hour from Mercy's grave, almost certainly knew the story. Echoes of it turn up in his fiction. The comfortable vampire, the count, the cape, the castle may owe a quiet debt to a 19-year-old farm girl whose neighbors burnt her heart. So where did the vampire really come from? Not from evil. That's the thing we get wrong. The people of Exeter weren't villains. They weren't ignorant monsters cackling in a graveyard. They were terrified. They were watching people they loved die slowly, mysteriously, one after another, with no doctor able to stop it, and no explanation that made sense. The germ theory of disease, the idea that a tiny living organism causes tuberculosis, had only just been proven by Robert Koch in 1882 in Germany. That knowledge had not reached a poor farming town in Rhode Island. Not yet. So they reached for the only tool they had, an old belief that gave them something to fight, a body to blame, an action to take when you're feeling powerless against an invisible killer. The folklore of the vampire offered something almost unbearable to give up, the feeling that you could do something. The vampire was never in the coffin. The vampire was the disease. Tuberculosis is the monster in this story, a thing that drains the color and the life and the breath out of a person over months, that passes from a mother to a daughter to a son sleeping in the next bed. It fit the legend so perfectly because the legend had been built over centuries to explain exactly this. That's the real origin, not a book, not a castle, a killer no one could see, and a grief no one could bear. So, is the vampire real? No. And yes. There was never a creature in that grave. Mercy Brown was a sick girl who died of a disease, and whose body was preserved by nothing more than a cold stone room and a New England winter. But the fear was real. The desperation was real. And the thing they were actually fighting, tuberculosis, was more relentless than any monster we've ever invented. It killed more people than the vampire legend ever could, and for most of human history we were powerless against it. We didn't invent the vampire because we love horror. We invented it because we needed a face for the thing that was killing us in the dark. Mercy Brown didn't become a legend because she was a monster. She became a legend because the people who loved her had no other way to understand their grief. You can still visit her. Chestnut Hill Cemetery in Exeter, Rhode Island. Her headstone is still there, with an iron band bolted across it to stop people from chipping pieces away. And if you enjoyed this one, hit like and subscribe, because the next legend we exhume is buried just as deep, and I don't want you to miss where it really came from. Here's the question I'll leave you with. Put it in the comments. If your family were dying one by one, and your terrified neighbors swore there was a cure, a horrible one, How sure would you have to be that they were wrong to tell them no? George Brown wasn't sure enough. Some things don't stay buried.